Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating story. We're looking at how a single three-wheeled invention patented way back in 1886 literally reshaped the entire modern world. We'll be exploring the definitive history and the massive high-stakes future pivot of one of the most recognized brands on the planet. I'm talking, of course, about Mercedes-Benz. So, let's kick things off with a pretty fundamental question. Who actually engineered the very first internal combustion engine car as we know it today? It's a foundational puzzle for the history of modern transportation, and the answer takes us right to the roots of this iconic German automaker. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the birth of the automobile, global expansion and war, pioneering automotive safety innovations, dominating the global racetrack, and finally, driving the electric future. All right, Section 1, the birth of the automobile. Let's jump back to 1886. This is when Karl Benz patented the Benz Patent-Motorwagen, which is widely regarded as the first true automobile. And here's a cool fact. It was financed entirely by his wife Bertha Benz's dowry. Fast forward a bit to 1901, and we have Austrian entrepreneur Emil Jelinek marketing the very first Mercedes automobile for Gottlieb Daimler's company. He actually named it after his own daughter. These two rival paths eventually collided in 1926, which is when the companies officially merged to form the powerhouse we know today as Mercedes-Benz. The whole identity of the brand was built right from the start on the slogan, "The best or nothing." And that really reflects Emil Jelinek's brilliant early marketing strategy. He wasn't just trying to sell cars to anyone. He aggressively promoted these early machines to the absolute highest tier of society in Europe and the New World. By selling directly to famous billionaires, we're talking the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Astors, and the Morgans, he permanently locked in the brand's ethos of absolute, uncompromising luxury. Moving on to Section 2, Global Expansion and War. We have to look objectively at a very dark chapter in the company's history. During the 1930s and World War II, Daimler-Benz shifted heavily into military production. They manufactured the 770 model, which was notoriously popular throughout the Nazi regime, alongside military trucks and aero engines. In fact, by 1942, civilian car production had basically ground to a halt. According to the company's own records, by 1944, nearly half of their roughly 63,000 employees were forced laborers, prisoners of war, or concentration camp detainees. Acknowledging this horrific period, the company did later pay $12 million in reparations to the families of those victims. Following the war, the company had to rebuild, and they did so by rapidly expanding their global footprint. In 1951, they opened their very first foreign plant down in Argentina. Then, in 1958, they established a major foothold in the U.S. market through a strategic partnership with Studebaker. This really set the stage for a massive global assembly network that would pretty quickly spread to Brazil, South Africa, India, and way beyond. Next up, Section 3, Pioneering Automotive Safety Innovations. You might not realize just how many standard safety features in the car you drive today actually originated with Mercedes-Benz. It's pretty staggering. Early on, they introduced the drop chassis to essentially lower the car's center of gravity compared to those early tippy horseless carriages. Then, they completely pioneered passive safety with the safety cage and crumple zones back in 1951. They also brought the anti-lock braking system to market in 1980, followed by the electronic stability program, and later, the pre-safe system, which actually actively prepares the car for an imminent crash. And what's really great is that they frequently licensed out these life-saving innovations for their competitors to use. To put this into perspective, before these innovations, cars were mostly built to be entirely rigid. That meant in a crash, the brutal physics of the impact were transferred directly into the passengers. Ouch. By engineering the front and rear of the vehicle to intentionally crumple, that kinetic energy gets absorbed and dissipated. Meanwhile, a super rigid passenger cell right in the middle remains completely intact to protect the fragile human body inside. It was a total game changer. Now, with decades of growth and all these new innovations, their vehicle lineup got huge. So, to logically organize this vast array of modern cars, Mercedes completely rationalized their naming system in 2015. They basically linked their popular SUVs directly to the sizes of their core sedan models, which makes total sense. The GLK became the GLC to align with the C-Class sedan, the ML became the GLE to match the midsize E-Class, and that massive GL SUV, it became the GLS, which is the SUV equivalent to their flagship S-Class. All right. Moving into Section 4, Dominating the Global Racetrack. Their motorsport history is honestly a roller coaster of extreme highs and absolutely devastating lows. For starters, a single Benz competed in the world's very first motor race way back in 1894, but their involvement came to a sudden, tragic halt following the horrific 1955 Le Mans disaster, where Mercedes-Benz actually launched into the stands, tragically killing over 80 spectators. After that, they totally withdrew from frontline motorsport for decades. They didn't really return until 1987. But wow, when they eventually re-entered Formula One, they unleashed an absolute record-breaking streak. Starting in 2014, they became the first team to win 7 consecutive double championships. And that brings us to Section 5, Driving the Electric Future. $11 billion. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount the company announced it would invest by 2022 just to ensure that every single Mercedes-Benz model has a fully electric or hybrid version available on the market. And all of that is backed up by a massive global network of battery factories. However, a dramatic shift of this scale definitely doesn't come without a heavy structural cost. To aggressively fund this massive electric pivot and try to stay competitive with modern EV rivals, the company announced it would shed around 10,000 jobs worldwide. It's a stark, very real consequence of having to reallocate massive resources to completely transition their workforce and their production pipelines for a new era. It's incredibly fascinating to juxtapose where they started with where they're going. Think about it. In 1886, they literally invented the gasoline-powered internal combustion engine for human transport. They started it all. But today, their modern EQ brand is entirely dedicated to battery electric power, with the ultimate goal of leaving gasoline behind for good. Looking even further down the road, Mercedes is completely rethinking the very nature of driving itself. They've revealed some wild experimental concepts, like the Vision AVTR, which was actually inspired by the sci-fi movie Avatar and functions as a sort of futuristic, mobile chill-out zone. But we aren't just talking about science fiction here. Their conditionally automated drive pilot system has already received real-world approval by the German Federal Motor Transport Authority for use in flowing traffic up to 95 kilometers per hour, right on the Autobahn. So, this leaves us with a final, rather provocative thought to ponder. We've just seen how they laid down the very foundation of the modern automotive world over a century ago. But the big question is, can the 130-year-old pioneer of gas-powered cars successfully out-innovate the electric and autonomous future? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this structured look into their history gives you a much deeper understanding of the road ahead.